We are talking CHAW or CHAWZ or something like that. This is a Korean wild boar movie, a creature feature, a killer animal on the loose film from 2009. And it follows the basic CHAWZ kind of setup. We have this small kind of rural town in Korea, and this cop is transferred from Seoul to this small kind of town. But just at this time, it happens to be menaced by a giant mutant killer boar. And this boar now is feasting on humans because we as humans have destroyed its natural habitat and farmed all the land, and it's now created this kind of ecological mess where it's changing the way the other animals are effectively living their lives, so to speak. So it has somewhat of an ecological message. And we have this cop along with a group of other individuals, including other police, sort of kind of scientists, hunters, things like this, get together and try and hunt down this beast. All this time you've got the town officials don't want kind of it to get out because it's going to affect tourism, a la CHAWZ and things like that. What will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. So, CHAW. Now, this is kind of a mid-budget movie, but by the looks of it, it's certainly a better production visually and on its kind of technical elements than, say, something like an Asylum movie or a Sci-Fi Channel movie, but not like the kind of level that you would expect to see at the cinema. It's kind of in between is the best way I would describe it. But it is I would suggest, a relatively well put together movie in regards to its technical elements. It's quite well shot. This being obviously a Korean movie, it's all kind of shot around there, and it takes advantage of the kind of the local environments and kind of landscapes and stuff, and that's looks a little different from obviously what we see kind of in the West. The movie, despite being, I would say, primarily a horror film, it is certainly a horror comedy. And there is some broad humour here. And if you like the kind of Three Stooges kind of style of comedy, there are certainly elements of that in this movie, to the point where at times it almost feels like a parody, I'd have to say. But if you are a fan of that sort of style of humour, the very kind of like broad and somewhat juvenile humour, has to be said, then I think you may get a kick out of this. But at the same time, there are scenes here that are taken relatively seriously, and certainly that involves the boar and when it's attacking are actually kind of filmed in quite a dramatic kind of fashion. The boar itself is mostly kind of CGI in scenes, but there are a few instances where it's kind of partially practical effects and things like that. Like I said, I think the effects here, and we have to bear in mind this is a 2009 film, I think they look better than average for your kind of typical sort of straight-to-DVD style movie. Yes, I have seen some critiques about there are a couple of sequences where the CGI doesn't look quite as good, and yes, that is true, but I would have to say, having watched many a creature feature where we have CGI kind of monsters, I genuinely thought this was probably better than average when you compare it against other kind of that range budget or around that range budget movies, certainly even up to today. For the most part, I think it looks pretty good. If you are somewhat forgiving of maybe 2009 CGI, not done on a mega high budget, but yeah, I think it's well animated. I mean, it kind of gallops around and chases after people, and I think it's animated pretty well. Yeah. So, for the most part, I think the actual, the CGI looks pretty good. The creature looks kind of pretty terrifying. The characters, like I say, they're for the most part treated somewhat whimsically. So we have a kind of a lighter touch, certainly with some of the kind of the character moments here, which gives it, all the characters for the most part have a somewhat goofiness to them, which I think would make it endearing to certainly some people, because there's nothing here is taken necessarily too seriously. I will have to say, going on to maybe what does not work for me, this being a film from Korea, there may be a couple of scenes involving animals that might be a little upsetting for some. Nothing too terrible, but nonetheless I would be remiss if I didn't point that out. So what doesn't work in this movie outside of that? I have to say I think this movie is a little meandering. I mean, it's 2 hours runtime. I don't know if films are good that have length or more, but this didn't really have enough going on, I didn't think, to kind of warrant you know, a 2 hour runtime really. And I certainly found the scenes that didn't involve the boar kind of boring, to no pun intended there. Because yeah, it's a lot of kind of like silliness. And let me give you an example of kind of the humour here. The first sort of scene we see, the first attack, we have this police on a kind of hillside, and they discovered, like, you know, evidence of a boar attack or something. At this point they don't know. But all of the police end up kind of just falling down this hill and kind of rolling down the end, and kind of ending up on the kind of the body and stuff. So that's your kind of level of humour. I was surprised because the setup doesn't kind of feel like that would be sort of suitable. But I guess that is the difference between that and maybe a straight JAWS rip-off, because the movie does follow that JAWS basic kind of skeleton of a storyline. I did read that the Korean filmmakers were somewhat influenced by American B-movies. But yeah, it kind of follows the broad JAWS template. But I have got to go back to the humour. You know, I have to say I found it a little tonally inconsistent, certainly, because it veers from being extraordinarily goofy to scenes where we're getting some serious scenes where we're having the boar attacks, and then we have a couple of like just superfluous sequences, and then we have like scenes where they're boiling like a live fish, for example. So it's a real mix. I have to say as well, going on to maybe the meandering part, there's too many characters, I think, in this movie. Had this movie been thinned down a little bit to make it a little bit of a leaner film, I mean, there is a central character, but I feel like we spend so much time with some of these supporting characters, and there are a lot of them. You feel the movie is somewhat directionless. Yes, it follows the broad strokes of that JAWS plot, but it kind of has these little meandering sort of side missions and side characters that you just don't feel like really need to have such in-depth kind of time spent with them, or sort of like sequences at all, for example. Going back to the CGI, there are one or two shots where I think I can see where the complaints come from. Certainly there's some composite shots here that don't look particularly good, and we have a sequence where like a boar is sort of standing next to someone, and it kind of looks, really CGI and kind of put together, if that makes sense. But I will say, personally speaking, I preferred the effects more than I didn't. I just think this movie's outstayed its welcome, and I think the tonal inconsistencies may appeal to audiences in Korea. I don't really know, but for certainly me in the West, it felt uneven and it didn't really mix all that well, personally speaking. And I just wasn't interested in the characters. They were a little bit too goofy to kind of buy into as genuine characters. There's too much time spent with other characters that you just didn't need, or storylines that just seemed to kind of like bleed into one another that didn't really go anywhere. So for me, it's a okay sort of creature feature. I think the actual scenes with the boar are very good, or at least very watchable, but it's the rest of the movie around it where I feel this is maybe not so good. So it's a 5 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.